So for this quarterly report, we're talking a lot about landing impacts, being able to track landing impacts. And it was by happenstance that I was speaking to my friend Bob Enck here, Professor Bob Enck here, about landings just the other day. And so he's kind enough to jump on this video call because the number one question that we get asked is, all right, cool, VERT can measure the landing impact of our athletes, see how well they attenuate those ground forces. And we can isolate players who land more stiffly than others, but what can be done about it? Like, can you change the way an athlete lands at the collegiate level? Um, the answer is it depends, right? It depends how much you can change it. But Bob was just talking to me about one instance they had, and he's kind enough to share it. So, Professor Enck, thanks a lot for hopping on with me today. And
Okay.
if you could start, give me a little bit about a background about how you, as a professor, got involved with using, vert and tracking player load with the women's volleyball team at St. John Fisher.
Okay. So great. Hey, Dave, thanks for having me on. So I taught 30 years high school physics. Then I started teaching. I've taught college physics for the last 3 years. And I started teaching biomechanics also just recently. And I had a learning assistant who was on the volleyball team. And she introduced me to her coach. And so we decided to explore what it means to be a sports scientist. And the coach was very interested in working with us in terms of how we can collect data on players so she can make decisions for practice and for games. So VERT sensors came up immediately. She had some old ones that were outdated, and we started. Sydney French is the learning assistant. Her and I started investigating what VERT sensors are and what they could do for us. And right away, we decided that they were a great tool. So we ordered a team set of them, put them on the players started wearing them. They wear them every day during practice and during games. And the thing, tried to start out slow. We looked at number of jumps,
Mhm.
looked at, and the landing forces, the elevated landing was something that we were interested in right away as well. The energy and the workload piece, we ended up, halfway through the season, we started figuring out how to use that, and that became very interesting to us as well. But going back to the landing piece, we started watching players' landing forces, elevated landings, and saw right away one player in particular. There was a couple though that had some elevated landings, but one player in particular had some very high elevated landings quite often. And at the time, we weren't surprised really, I guess, because she had a strained calf and was having difficulty having that heal. So when the coach saw that there was that Delaney had an elevated landing percentage or higher landing forces,
Mhm.
she had us videotape her landings. We were specifically, how her feet were landing, and it was obvious right away to her that she was landing on her toes and wasn't rolling back into her heels on the landing. I mean, it looked like it would hurt for sure, just landing on your toes, and your calves would have to grab and stop you from falling instead of letting your body kind of roll back. And so the coach immediately started working with her in terms of getting her to land properly. And this particular athlete, is very coachable, and actually she was somebody who's very interested in data and was
Mhm.
very interested, and actually the whole team was very interested in data. But anyway, she was very interested in what was going on and really saw that her landings were elevated. So I think seeing the numbers actually I know this for a fact, seeing the numbers actually really motivated her to say, oh, this is why I'm injured. So I really do need to do something about it. And really listened to the coach and started doing this exact type of landing that the coach wanted her to do. And her elevated landings after a week started going down. Her calf strain after a couple weeks was getting much better. And she was pretty excited about this, that she was able to decrease that her forces of landing. And I really do think that looking at the numbers and then the coach telling her how to fix it was really a motivator in terms of, you see the data, it doesn't lie. You're injured, that doesn't lie. So she just jumped right on and fixed it. Um, there's a couple other players that the coach talked to about how to land. It was very similar issues with landing on your toes and not rolling and so on. And so she, the players really bought into this
Hmm.
whole idea.
No,
Uh,
it's fantastic. And when and this is what I talk to a lot of programs where when a coach is watching practice, they're watching a million things.
right.
What position did they get into? Did the libero cover where she's supposed to? What rotation are they working on? Was it a good swing? Was it a good pass? Was there platform, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? You can't. It's very challenging to also say, okay, and how did each player land on this movement? Um, so I think that's the point, frankly, of the platform. I refer to as another set of eyes to kind of alert you to this, and that's something we see pretty often with those hard landings. And for those who may be watching this unfamiliar is what we mean specifically about elevated landing percent is the sensor sitting around the waist. What it's doing is it can essentially read how much of that landing force, like how well it was attenuated or absorbed up. So if you have a player who's really toe heavy, right, they're in that plantar flexed state, plantar flexion. If you kind of try to bend your knees and your hips a lot when you're landing and keeping your toes pointed. It's just not really possible. So it stiffens everything up the kinetic chain. And that's why the sensor is able to read this jolt as the athlete lands. But these are some of my favorite stories because I remember specifically us talking the first week, you all had it, right?
Yeah.
And this player in particular was like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's awesome. I greatly appreciate you coming on to share that with us. And it's not always that simple, right? Sometimes players are a lot harder to change their motor patterns, or they're not as motivated to change. But I guess it's pretty easy when you're in pain.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that just, if you didn't have the vert sensor, you didn't see the numbers, she might not really agree with that. Or like you said, the coach might not catch it. Or she might think, oh, it might be something else or something. But when the numbers say, hey, this is what's going on, you can't argue, right? You just go with that and say, okay, I'm going to fix it now. I really saw that as a really motivating factor for these players for sure.
And the best part was her. You did mention her as the season progressed, the stress, the calf strain deteriorated, like went away or improved.
Oh, the calf strain went away,
Okay.
wasn't there at all. And she was really high percentage elevated landings, and she went down dramatically. She was higher than many others. Some players have like almost zero elevated
Hmm.
landing, land like a butterfly, right? But
Yep.
hers went way down into the safe range, right? And she might have been higher than some others on the team, but definitely did not have any further injury from her landing. She had a good season. She was outside hitter, all conference. And if she was injured all season, that wouldn't have happened. So
Yeah. No, I think if I remember correctly, she was close to the 20%, and 20% elevated or above is where we start to see those red flags. Um, we look for any improvement, but hers was like double digit.
yeah, hers in the beginning was like 30%.
Oof.
Yeah, it was you. Well, right. You remember we had that conversation. We're like,
Yeah.
really? And we're like, yeah, really. This is what's going on. And so she got down to 20. I think she got into the teens. Low, and I don't know if she never got under 10. I don't think, but she
No,
started wavering in between like 10 and 15, which is phenomenal for her.
we will take that improvement.
Oh my gosh, yeah, yeah, it was really good.
Awesome. All right. Well, Professor Enck, thank you so much again for hopping on. And as always, anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. There's a number of different ways in which we can improve landings, but uh, I think as we discussed here, the number one way to improve landings is awareness first and foremost.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, we really appreciate your help all season, all last season. It was a big help in looking at the data. So thanks, David.
Anytime.